I would like to call to order the Harwich Board of Selectmen meeting for April 1st, 2020. And I'll call roll call to identify the Board of Selectmen members that are joining this meeting. Don.
I'm here.
Steve.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Michael.
I'm here.
And we're also joined by the Chair of Finance Committee, Dana DeCosta, and Board of Health Director, Megan Eldridge, and Mr. John Giorgio, who we'll get to later. Joel, let me turn the meeting over to you on to start with old business.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it right over to Megan Eldridge, our Health Director, for her updates on COVID-19.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, wonderful. So since we spoke last on Monday, we've had an increase in the statewide number of positive tests. Today's number is 7,738. That is over 1,000 new cases since yesterday. That's more cases in one day than that the state has seen so far. Countywide, we have 255 positive cases. Statewide, we have 122 deaths associated with COVID-19. And since it is out in the public on social media, I will confirm that Harwich does have one death associated with COVID-19. Normally, I wouldn't be reporting deaths and numbers to the public like this, but I feel like this is a milestone, and it really hammers in the fact that this is a serious virus and it's affecting us townwide, statewide, nationwide, and we all need to do our part to maintain social distancing and washing our hands, not touching our faces, and really sticking to those guidelines right now because it's still spreading. It's still in the community. We need to slow it down and stop the spread. And the best way to do that is to stop that person-to-person contact. So the closest people you should be near are the ones living in your household. If they're not in your household, you should not be within 6 feet of other people. That will really prevent the spread of the virus because it's in your respiratory droplets. Other updates. Today we did get a supply of personal protection equipment from MEMA. This was a request that we had put in. The police and fire departments had put this request in, and it did come in today. We were looking for it last week, and thankfully it came today, and it was very welcome sight. We have plenty of gowns, masks, and gloves, and some disinfecting supplies as well that were restocked today. We did also receive notification from Barnstable County that their money that has come through from the state for local boards of health has also been distributed. We have to put in invoices to the county to cover COVID-related costs such as overtime, VNA, staffing, case tracking, that sort of thing. So our first allotment for that was just over $6,000. We expect a second in the next couple of weeks and then a third eventually. So just to give you an idea of what costs are at the moment, the VNA, it does all of our case tracking, and that's for all infectious diseases. And up until 2 weeks ago, they had just expended their regular $4,000 yearly fiscal year budget for all infectious diseases. So if we can kind of extrapolate from there, it seems as though it costs about $1,400 a week for our low case numbers. So when we were seeing 2 to 3 cases, it was costing about $1,100 a week. We're seeing more cases now, we have more than a dozen cases in town. The good news is that the state has reduced the amount of contact that cases need to have between the VNA or whichever nursing agency you're using in the isolated or quarantined patients. Up until about 2 days ago, if we had a positive case or a close contact or someone who was in quarantine, we were required to touch base via phone or Skype or something to make sure that they were monitoring their health and staying in isolation or quarantine daily. The people that were experiencing symptoms were checked in twice a day. So the VNA was charging us in 15-minute increments every time they touched base with someone. And now the state has relaxed that. And if it's a case where you're comfortable that they are abiding by the isolation requirements, they say we can touch base with them every 2 to 3 days. So that will be a much less expensive way of going about this. And also, as the VNA gets overwhelmed with work throughout the Cape, they are comfortable turning over some of that contact tracing to volunteers or other nurses that we have available to us, whether that's through the MRC or our own nursing staff that we have on town salary. So also students from different departments of public health, schools of public health have offered to volunteer to do some of this work as well. So we are trying to keep the costs down as much as we can because we know this is going to get more expensive than we would like. That's it for my updates. So if you have any questions, I'll be here and then I'll be back again for a public comment period.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions or comments for Megan? Thanks again, Megan. We'll turn it back to Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing more to add on the COVID-19 update, other than just saying how excited we all were in the EOC to see the supply truck arrive today. You know, kind of a surreal feeling to be excited about medical supplies being delivered, but it was still encouraging and a very positive, well-received activity today. So we did sort of buoyed our spirits, I think. Other than that, I think we're ready to move on to item B under old business, which is the primary item tonight, discussion of the annual town meeting, annual town election. And for that, I will defer to council, the moderator, and the town clerk, but am available to answer questions.
I believe I
Who wishes to? Okay, Nita.
very much for having us here tonight. I'm sure that the Board of Selectmen have all received the memo that I had placed on in your packet regarding the logistical movements that have to take place. The most important thing, I'm going to start with the town meeting. The most important thing in front of everything would be to make sure that we have the moderators available and he will be available, or the availability of his being able to be and run the town meeting. The thing that we would need to consider also is to make sure that the community center, that you will be able to reopen the community center to allow people to be in the community center. And there's some outside third-party people that we contact regarding the sound system that works with Channel 18 and the cart reporter, to which we have that cart reporter that puts the words up on the screen so people can read that as the town meeting is going along, and also the help of the highway department to help set up the gym to make sure that they would be staffed and ready to go with that. For this, I'd like to turn this over right now to Michael Ford, if Michael's there, to be able to talk about his availability for the change of the town meeting if the board should choose to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Michael, are you here? He may not have joined us yet.
Star, he did join. He did join. He pushed star 6, Mike. Am I on now, Larry?
You're on.
Okay, Mike Ford. So thanks for allowing me to participate in this important decision. At a Board of Selectmen's meeting today in Orleans, they continued their town meeting to June 15th. So I'm available, Larry, and will make myself available any other day in June that your board decides is the right day for Harwich. The Orleans town meeting is generally only one night. While you might not want to go to June 16th because it might go 2 nights because they don't get a quorum the first night in Orleans, that's the only reason I see it going 2 nights, because they've decided to have a very Spartan warrant and do the rest of their articles in the fall. All of their zoning and other non-financial matters they're going to push to the fall, so that I think if they get a quorum, they'll be able to get through it very quickly. So my availability is any night other than the 15th, and you might want to stay away from the 16th as well.
I think there was one email, I forget who it was from, was suggesting June 15th or June 22nd, or excuse me, June 22nd, June 29th. Is that correct?
No, I sent an email to Anita and copied Joe saying that Orleans was considering 2 dates, June 15th and June 22nd. They decided today at 4 o'clock, June 15th is going to be their date. So that's the date that I'm not available. I am available any other date in June.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Any, Anita, where do you want to go next? You want John Giorgio to comment?
If John would like to comment on the town meeting, that would be fine. Or if he'd like to lead into the election, that's entirely up to him. I know in my memo that I've gone over this with John, all the criteria things that need to happen, whether you choose to keep the election on the 19th or you choose to move it. My suggestion would be that you would move it after the town meeting. If you choose to put the town meeting at the beginning of June, have the election at the end of June. But John, would you like to comment? That's absolutely
Sure.
fine.
Certainly. Can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So as you know, under normal circumstances, you have to complete your annual town meeting by June 30th in order to be able to start spending on July 1st. And so you have to have your budget in place. The Senate, however, is taking up a municipal relief bill. We had hoped it was going to pass today, but I don't think it will, or it has not as of yet. But that bill has a lot of very obviously useful provisions, one of which says that if a municipality does not have the budget or its town meeting by June 30th, it can on July 1st start spending on a 1/12 basis from last year's budget. And we fully expect that that provision will remain in the bill once it's enacted. There are also provisions that will allow you to continue at the same level with your revolving funds. You can use certified free cash and enterprise fund balances with the approval of the Bureau of Accounts in order to fund your budget, assuming you don't have a budget by June 30th. Hopefully that we won't have to rely upon those provisions, but as I said, the legislation is expected to have a number of provisions that will provide you with that flexibility. Now, the other thing I would mention is because you have not yet posted the warrant, the Board of Selectmen is free to choose any date for the annual town meeting, notwithstanding any charter provision that requires your town meeting be held on a particular date. You have that authority to postpone town meeting, and certainly, a date of June 15th or June 22nd in that range is certainly a range that we're seeing is a lot of towns are going to. So it really is a question for the board to decide when you want to set the date for your annual town meeting. And when it's appropriate, I'm happy to discuss postponing the election as well.
Thank you, John. Let me open up to the
Larry.
other selectmen. Comments, questions?
Larry, Steve Ford,
Steve?
through you to John. John, is there also a provision in that legislation relating to the quorum in a town meeting and whether we could adjust what the quorum is?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Steve. Again, we're going to have to wait and see what finally comes out of the general court. But there is a provision that I noticed that allows the Board of Selectmen to adjust the quorum for town meeting. So the Board of Selectmen could waive the quorum requirement if necessary in order to achieve the business of town meeting. But stay tuned on that. We want to make sure that's in the final bill.
Thank you.
Larry, this is Don.
Don?
Through you again to John. I might point out a quorum is a floor. It's not a ceiling. So I'm not, if other than us worrying about whether we can collect enough people to start the meeting, we're not going to be able to turn away anybody.
Right. I think the idea, Don, is that if people are still concerned about physical distancing, when we get to the date of town meeting, we don't need the quorum as provided for in the bylaws in order to convene town meeting, if the Board of Selectmen choose to reduce it.
But there isn't any provision for alternate participation, right? I mean, you would have to physically be there.
That's correct. Did you want me to talk about the election?
I think we temporarily lost Larry again. He should be back in a minute.
Oh, okay.
We don't have anything that would necessitate an override being on the ballot, though. So except for the warrant, except for the charter revisions, it's really not tethered to town meeting like it would be if we passed an override at town meeting and then needed an election to ratify it.
Yeah, it would be good to hear what John has to say about the election, though.
So, should we wait for Larry to get back on?
I think so.
Scott, I'm sorry. My internet seems to come and go, so I'll stay on the phone for a while.
Just for your knowledge, Larry, I've left the meeting open. Seeing left, I've opened the meeting so we could have other people join, but whereas people are dropping off, it might be best just to leave it open.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
So, Larry, I was just going to talk about the options for the election.
Okay, please.
So, unlike the town meeting situation, the general court has actually passed the legislation on postponing of your election, and that does not include any provision for extending your election beyond June 30th. So as we stand here today, you will have to schedule your election before June 30th. But having said that, the Board of Selectmen is free to set the date of the election by voting a date at least 20 days into the future. So in other words, you could vote tonight. I'm not necessarily suggesting this, but you could vote tonight to postpone the election to a date that's no more than 20 days from tonight. So you should keep that in mind. And Anita's memo is very thorough about the various things that have to occur. The thing to keep in mind, the only election calendar date that would change is you have to keep open the ability to register to vote for a period of up to 10 days before the election. All your other deadlines and election calendar items remain in effect. And the legislation provides that any incumbent who would otherwise, whose term would otherwise end, on the date of your regular election, will continue to serve until the new election. So you should look at your calendar and decide what is the best date to hold the election vis-a-vis the town meeting. If Anita already has printed election materials with the old date, that's not a problem. She can use for example, the official ballots. I don't know if you've ordered those or not, Anita, but even if they have the wrong date, ultimately, you can still use them in the election process.
John,
So-
I did not have the signed warrant, so therefore I have not gone forward to have any ballots printed as of yet, today.
Okay, so do you normally have the date on the ballot, on the official ballot, Anita?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so depending upon the timing, Truro, for example, the Board of Selectmen has voted to postpone the election, but they haven't actually voted to set a new date. And so that's another option you have if you want to do that. There are provisions in the law that provide that once you do postpone the election, you have to make public notification, and there are a series of things in the statute that you're required to do, in addition to posting a revised warrant, obviously, for the election itself.
Correct, John. I believe that's in the memo. I believe I had placed it in the memo for the board to see what it was needed to be done.
Yep, that's correct. Any other questions for Nita, Michael, or John? While they're forming their questions, I gather then there's two separate actions that we need to consider. One concerns town meeting, one concerns the election. If we concentrate on the town meeting, it sounds to me like this is information that we need, Anita, as you point out, to give some additional information on availability not only of the town moderator, Michael, but also of the community center, CART, DPW, and so on. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, Larry, that is correct. We need to take all of those into consideration. I believe in Michael Ford, I don't want to speak for you, but I believe you had probably indicated that the best time for you would be the beginning of June. Am I correct on that, sir?
Actually, the best time for me, now that Orleans has decided to have their meeting on the 15th, is any time after that or before that. And so if the board feels that early June is maybe too early to come off of what we're going through now, I'm available. So I don't want the selectmen to think that I'm only available in the early part of the month.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, that's important. Go ahead.
The other thing,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Larry, if you hold the meeting, the town meeting, the election can be held the next week.
Okay.
You need to consider that as well.
All right. And so if we held it sometime after the Orleans, but the third week in June, that might give us a fighting chance to get the election in before the end of the month.
Larry? Larry, if I may?
Michael?
Now, I would suggest that we pick the date of June 22nd. And if Michael Ford's available and John Giorgio's available and Anita's available, I'm not sure that there's anything more important for the community center than town meeting. So I'd be willing to put my neck out and say June 22nd would be the date.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Yeah, I would.
So, Larry, this is Mike Ford.
We might have lost Larry again.
Or
Yeah,
star
okay.
6 if he's on his phone.
Oh,
Larry?
Well,
Larry?
Joe, while we're waiting for Larry to come back on, there was one thing I wanted to mention as well. If the board does designate, let's say, June 22nd for the town meeting, once the warrant is posted for that date, the only other way you can deal with a further postponement would be under the provisions of Chapter 39, Section 10A, which allows the town moderator, in consultation with the Board of Selectmen, to recess and continue town meeting to a later date. It can't be more than 30 days after the date that was designated in the warrant. And that's due to if there's inclement weather or an emergency. Now, one of the things the legislation will do is a couple of things. One, make clear that a public health emergency is a reason, a justification for that recess and continuation. And also the legislation allows the moderator to do that any number of times in succession until the emergency has abated. So even if you schedule the town meeting for June 22nd and we get to close to June 22nd and it's clear that we're not able to hold the town meeting, then the moderator, with the consultation of the board, could delay that for another 30 days and then another 30 days. And that will all dovetail with the legislation that allows you to go into the new fiscal year with a 1/12 budget if you haven't held town meeting. Mike, have you had to do that before?
Never had to use it in all these years, John.
Yeah, I've had it a couple of times, and it's pretty straightforward. It is a nice tool that the general laws provide.
It is.
I think Larry may have joined us again.
I somehow my internet connection, I'm coming and going.
It sounds like, Larry, maybe you've got your computer and a telephone going.
I muted my phone right now.
Okay.
Keep it on standby.
That's better.
Larry, did you hear that
So we have right
explanation?
now a motion and a second for June 22nd.
Larry, I think my brother Mike wanted to say something.
So
Mike?
if I could, Larry, as I understand the state of the law right now, which may well change if this bill passes, but right now your ability to continue an election is only to June 30th. And I think John Giorgio just confirmed that a few minutes ago, and that may well change with this new legislation. But Anita has said you need a week after the town meeting to do the election. So before you vote on the 22nd, you might just want to inquire of Anita whether or not having the election on June 29th works for her, because it seems to follow that if you vote the 22nd for town meeting, you probably ought to be considering June 29th for the election.
Michael, I just looked at the calendar, and actually the 29th is Monday. If the board chooses to put it on a Monday, that's fine. Tuesday would be the other option, which is June 30th.
Okay, good. So you're comfortable with
So
that?
we're good.
If this is what the board wishes, I'm comfortable with doing whatever they would wish to do. I will make it happen.
Thank you, Anita. Any other comments, discussion? And so,
Larry, this is Joe, if I may.
Joe,
Is it proper to include in that motion time at which to begin? I know that we've said that you're looking at the date of June 22nd. Should the time just be added to make it clear what time the meeting will start?
Good suggestion, Joe.
I'm sure Michael meant 7 o'clock, right?
I think, Michael, you made the motion. Would you add that to your motion?
My motion included it to start at 7 o'clock.
And that's still my second.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. We'll take a vote then. Again, because we're on the video conference, I'll do this by roll. Don?
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So that's been voted unanimously. Now, let's consider, I think we're at a point to entertain a motion to schedule the election then on, Anita, your preference would be Tuesday? Or does it matter?
Probably at this juncture, it really wouldn't matter. The only thing I'd have to take into consideration is that the highway department that sets up the polls for me, if the gym is open at that point, that weekend before, they would not be able to use the gym at all because the gym would be occupied with voting equipment. If you did it on Tuesday, it only interrupts it for Monday night. But there again, the choice is yours.
Mr. Chair.
It sounds like Tuesday may be a little more practical.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Any other
Larry, if I may.
discussion?
Joe,
You may, Joe, sure.
just to add to Anita, I would recommend Tuesday. If the law doesn't change on absentee balloting, that would require staff working evening hours on Friday before. If a Monday election is held, absentee balloting occurs Friday evening. If it's the Tuesday election and the rules generally apply, they could do it until noontime as a standard. So I think that allows staff more opportunity to work on the election if you do it Tuesday, unless the clerk has objection.
And before we make a motion, can Anita just say what time she would like in that motion?
Thank you very much. Also, with the new legislation, if people should be concerned, I emailed this to Joe earlier and also to John. If people are concerned about showing up at the polls, the Board of Selectmen do have they can vote to minimize the voting hours for the polling location to be open for 4 hours, starting before noontime and ending 4 hours after that. Also, this would also give people the opportunity to be able to either apply for an absentee ballot or an early voting ballot, because we do have, fortunately at this juncture, we do have an uncontested ballot. So people can vote by mail this time if they're concerned about coming out, even at that point in time, into the public. And if the board should choose to have the hours of voting reduced to a 4-hour period, that would be the pleasure of the board.
Is that your recommendation, Anita?
That's what I would suggest, and hoping that people would apply for absentee ballots and for early voting ballots. It does put a little bit more strain on my office, but I'm thinking right now of the citizenship right now of we have town of Harwich. It might make people more comfortable being able to vote by mail.
Thank you.
That's my opinion, but whatever you would choose to do is absolutely fine with me.
Thank you. Other questions? Michael, is that enough information to form a motion?
That's plenty of information for me, and Anita's opinion is certainly very valuable to me as well.
Okay, one more thing. Sorry, Michael, but one more thing. The polls say that they can be open no earlier than 12 noon, or I'm sorry, later than 12 noon. In other words, for an example, you could open up the polls at 10 o'clock in the morning and close them at 2. You could open them at 11 and close them at 3. You can open them at 12 and close them at 4, whatever your pleasure would be.
Larry, if I could, it's Steve Ford.
Steve, please.
Just a question. I mean, if we shorten the hours, wouldn't that kind of push more people into that time frame and have the chance that more people are going to be in the building at the same time if we shorten the hours?
Steve, I would reiterate what I had said earlier. Was what I'm hoping for is that people will take advantage of voting by mail as opposed to coming into the community center. There again, it's up to the board. Whatever the board would choose to do is I'm fine with that. But this also gives the citizens of the town of Harwich a little bit more flexibility to be able to vote by mail. It's either voting for an absentee ballot or an early voting ballot. They get mailed the ballot and the ballot gets sent in to me and we process it right there at the election. So yes, you're right. people chose to come.
No, I think that would be, I agree with you. I think it'd be great. I just worry, you know how people tend to not pay attention, and then the next thing you know, they didn't do
Well, that would be
the absentee
something-
ballot. And, oh.
Right, but that would be something we'd have to advertise, that,
Right.
you know, the absentee ballots would be available. I said, this is just an option for you to consider. It's not something that it's not something that I'm, you know, it would be a nice idea for the public if this is something that you think would be a good idea for the Board of Selectmen to vote on. If you feel that the polls should be open the whole day, like I normally do, from 7 in the morning to 8 at night, that's absolutely fine too.
Speaking for me, I'm comfortable with the something like 11 to 3, and we'll spend time advertising and getting the word out. But Michael, I think you were going to try a motion so we could debate it.
Just one other question of Anita. Shortening the hours, do we have to shorten it to 4? Can we shorten it, you know, to a 6-hour day instead of a 7 to 8? Is there anything in between, or do we have to do 4 or all day?
I believe I can defer to John for this. Anything I've read has been 4 hours, but I believe there could be a shortening of hours. I mean, lengthening of those. It doesn't have to be, you know, just 4. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Anita. It has to be a minimum of 4 hours, but you could have something, right now, what do you have? 13 hours probably?
Yes, sir.
So you can do something less than 13, but it has to be a minimum of 4.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I would move, just to get a motion on the floor, I'd move that we move the election until June 30th, hours to be 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Second, it's on.
Don, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just make one comment, because I just want to make sure that the public doesn't think we totally lost our senses here. It's really clear that the pandemic is not a light switch. It's not going to go to like May 31st and you turn it off and it's all gone. I mean, the crest hopefully will have already happened by then, but it doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a possibility of catching it. At least that's the current news from the CDC. So we only have the information we have. We've got to schedule something because we have to schedule something, but I'm presuming since we're all in this together, that whatever developments occur will happen statewide and they'll have to consider them as they come along. But knowing that, the only real credible option would be to make some plans right now to do this.
All right.
Agree.
If I may?
Yeah, please, John. Then I think maybe Ed wants to say something, but John?
So just for everybody's edification, as I indicated, the legislation on the election has already passed and they did not change the June 30th deadline. So what we would anticipate if in Don's scenario, we get closer into June and it's clear that it still will not be safe to hold elections in June, we would expect the legislature would act accordingly and extend that date. If they don't, the only way that you would be able to extend beyond June 30th is go to court and get a court order that would allow that, or get a governor's bill and a special act of the legislature. Those still would be your options if for whatever reason the general court did not act with a piece of general legislation as they did last week.
Larry, this is Joe. May I speak for a moment?
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. And I'm reluctant to weigh in, but I want the board to think for a moment that if we're in a scenario where a public election is a viable exercise in every sense of the word, meaning we can rely upon mail-in ballots, we can rely upon absentee ballots or early voted ballots. If it's early voting ballots, that's going to push a large number of people to access town hall in a smaller space, theoretically. However, I'm more concerned by the hours that are suggested, because if this exercise is something that could happen post-coronavirus or post-phase 1 of coronavirus, you've limited to a time where any number of people are going to be returning to work out of necessity. and they're not going to have the ability to vote early in person, and they're not going to have the ability to vote during the election 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Now, I know that's not the vast majority, but it is a sizable audience, and I can speak directly to having worked in a community that had less than 13-hour elections. I think if you're looking to create a 6-hour window, that you might want to reconsider the time frame for that window.
Joe, if I may, I've gotten a ruling from the Secretary of State's office that we can use early voting as a means of also having them apply for it and sending them out the ballot, which means that they will not have to come into town hall. They can do it by mail.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, if I may, Larry, I'd just like to finish. I still think you need to I think we need to be mindful about the election hours. In this exercise that you're doing, you've established a town meeting that will occur in the evening of June 22nd for hundreds of people. And less than a week later, you're reducing the amount of time during a daylight that can cause disenfranchisement, quite frankly. And I don't offer these comments lightly, but I think that we're talking about a bigger space that can accommodate more distancing if people still want to avail themselves of the right to vote in person. And I just want the board to be mindful of that as you look at the hours of consideration for the polling hours.
Larry?
Thank you, Joe. Steve?
Larry, that was Ed.
Ed?
Finally? Thank you. Yeah, I was going to, before Joe and the other two people commented in front of me, suggest that in order to be sure working folks were enfranchised, that if we are shortening the hours, we may want to just shorten it to 7 hours. Having it go from 11 in the morning until 6 at night, give an hour after what is generally considered the normal work day for working people to make it to the polls. Or to 7 o'clock and allow for 2 hours after the normal working day.
Larry,
I'm completely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment on what Ed said quickly, because I was been a registrar and an election worker for a lot of years too, and by the time 5:30 or 6 happens, it's like totally dead in terms of foot traffic. Between 6 and 8, it really goes down pretty quickly. I'm not sure that you'd want to go to 7.
Well, I initially was suggesting 6, but I think there should be at least 1 hour outside of what is the normal 8 to 5 workday that's available for people to come to the polls and vote.
Gotcha.
I'm comfortable modifying my motion if that's appropriate, Larry.
I think that'd be good.
I'll modify my motion to do the election on June 30th from 11 to 6.
I'll still second that.
We lose Larry?
Larry?
Now I'm on. We're moving ahead. The motion is from 11 until 6. It's been seconded. There's no further discussion. And so I'll start with the roll call vote. Ed?
Aye.
Michael?
Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Okay, good. We've taken some good direction then. We just hope we'll get rid of the flu enough to make these happen. Anita, thanks as usual for your leadership on this. And we'll see if we can pull this off. And John and Mike, thanks for your help.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike Ford signing off. I will tell you, John Giorgio, the last version of the bill I read out of the Senate, there is no provision for the selectmen to reduce the quorum. I think that may have been dropped at this point, but we'll see if it comes back.
Okay.
Thank you.
You have to keep that in mind. Okay, I guess that ends our old business. Scott, did you want to restate the directions for a public forum?
I certainly will. I'll let you know at this point we don't have anybody that has emailed in, but I will go through just a little bit of verbiage here to open that up again. Before we do open it up, we have a couple of housekeeping notes. This is a new format for public discussion. Please try to be patient. A reminder to those calling in to use *6 to mute and unmute. And please try to minimize background noise. To remind you, you do need to send an email to comment@town.harwich.ma.us to get in line to speak. At the time that we do open the meeting up, I'll take those in the first received. So at this point, we'll just wait a minute or two to see if anybody does send an email.
Okay, we'll be in pause then for a couple minutes.
Mr. Howell, to your earlier suggestion from the last meeting, we are going to try to put that up on channel 18 so that it was more available to anybody that did want to see that.
Thank you very much. Very grateful.
Scott and Joe, was okay with you. Why don't we go ahead?
Yep, I have no emails, so I'll just mute myself.
Okay. Joe, you want to move on to town administrator reports?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I really don't have anything more to add. As you can imagine, my day is filled more with responding to daily issues on either current actions for COVID or planning for COVID redeployment as time goes by. So I have nothing at this point to add under interim TA's report.
Okay, I'm sorry, I muted myself. We'll go next to the selectmen's report, and I'll go through by name. Steve?
Nothing in particular. I just want to, again, thank Joe and all the team in the town of Harwich for all the work they're doing. It's much appreciated. Also, thankful to Anita. This memo was excellent. It really kept us well informed on the two decisions we had to make tonight. And John Giorgio, thanks for your advice as well.
Thank you, Steve. Michael?
I'd start by mimicking Stephen's comments and thank yous to all involved in the epidemic. I do have a couple things. I have been waiting for some responses for emails for quite some time and information for quite some time. I'm not going to bore everybody with a long list tonight, but I am going to mention one and request that we have this information for our Monday meeting because I do think it's extremely important. The first is something that's new. I'd like to understand, and the board to have a conversation, how the dump is still having overtime. In the month of March, their overtime report shows about $4,700. So if I could get an answer as to why we're paying overtime at the dump when the recycle center is closed, and I believe the highway department, for the most part, most of the workers have been sent home, that would be helpful. Second is, months ago, I asked about, or probably not, maybe not that long ago, but I did ask about the administration office and how we were paying the past town administrator, Chris Clark. Joe, as the assistant town administrator, moved up. Bob Lawton, who we contracted with, the two administrative assistants, Elaine Banta being brought downstairs to work part-time, and knowing that we are over budget in there. We were supposed to see a report and then have something to go before Finance Committee for a reserve fund transfer. I've not seen that yet. And I'm a little concerned now with the, and I'd like some dates and times on this report, because I'm a little concerned with a fairly significant raise being given and somebody being brought up from a temporary, part-time temporary to a full-time temporary with a fairly substantial raise. And today I learned that we're actually paying somebody, and that at least one other selectman knows about that, paying someone to create minutes, of the backlog of minutes for the Board of Selectmen. And at a time where we do seem to have extra staff at this point, not everybody is dedicated to what we're going through. I would like to see and understand why we would pay somebody to create minutes, the backlog of minutes, and not utilize library staff or other staff. I know this isn't a debate tonight, but I would ask that we have this by Monday so we can understand it and get a handle on it.
We'll bring back some information. Don?
Mr. Chairman, this is Joe. Can I just respond to that?
Joe, please. Yep.
There is no meeting scheduled for Monday. I assume you mean the Tuesday, April 7th meeting?
That'll work.
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to ask the board this evening to give explicit instructions as to the specific topics that the board wants to get into, as the selectman just mentioned. I take particular exception with the comments about administrative costs, but we'll defend those next Tuesday. But I think it's important for the 5 board members to articulate specifically the topics that you wish to have addressed. It's exceedingly difficult at this time for me to deal with the day-to-day emergency crisis that we have and try and circle back on some issues that have been raised by email that I consider to be mundane, and I think at this point to be well beyond the need for any action by anybody. Certainly not anything that was just mentioned, but I do take exception to the question on administrative costs, but I'll recreate all of that if that's what the board needs me to do at this time.
Larry, if I may.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay, and I apologize that our acting town administrator takes exception to a question that was asked months ago prior to the COVID-19, and one that we've had several conversations about. But I will also point out that we are acting outside of what town meeting voted for a budget. And I do recognize the hours that people, that especially the acting town administrators, put in. But I would also say that the acting town administrator has a staff that he could direct to answer an email that said, I am too busy right now to deal with this. Can you please put it in writing? And this conversation has happened with the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen in a public meeting when the questions were first asked. Now, there are several things that have been up, but if nobody else is concerned with the fact that we are way over budget and we do have to do a reserve fund transfer, and that we did start talking about this months ago, then I will let it go. But I don't think that we should be, and I don't think that we're acting on the best interest of the taxpayers of the town of Harwich and not directing somebody else to put this together. So I apologize again for hurting people's feelings, for asking questions that my constituents are asking about. That is our job as elected officials, and I am not sorry for asking these questions.
Let me work with Joe and Mike. I'll circle back to you to formulate a couple of specific questions that we can get to on Tuesday then. Okay. Don?
Gosh, I hate to change the tone of things, but I still want to thank everybody for all their efforts. And Scott wasn't mentioned before, so I'm going to mention him again. This has been a remarkably difficult time for everybody, and everybody's doing a great job. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just comment on, I think we're always sensitive to tone. I'd like to rule that out, but I do want us to be careful that, and I know Joel is working really hard with all the stuff going on, but I do want us to be careful that we're not dropping the issues that we do need to attend to. And in some respects, it's hard to find a positive in all this that's going on, but it has freed up some people to catch up on backlog issues and get some items taken care of. And so we should take advantage of that. And it's fair to have I want to be respectful and good tone, but it's fair to see what we can do in the midst of all this, not downtime, but, locked in time, if you will. But I'll leave it there.
Yeah, this is Don again. I don't want to get into the discussion because we're going to have it on Tuesday, but I can assure you I'm going to bring up the fact that not just anybody can do minutes. Minutes have to be an accurate portrayal of what happened, and there's an art to that. It's not just I pick you, and you can type a third each.
Bring it up on Tuesday. We did have that discussion.
Sure.
Steve?
I already made a comment.
Okay, who am I missing? Ed, I guess.
Good.
Yes, I guess as two of my other fellow selectmen have indicated, I want to thank the town staff for the efforts they're putting in. I guess two things. One, I know we have furloughed staff from the Public Works Department. They're working minimally, but one of the things I've noticed over the weekend and today is I think with people needing to get out and get some exercise, they are walking on the beaches more often than you'd expect this time of year, and a number of the garbage cans at Bank Street and Red River over the weekend and today were overflowing. It's a windy time of year, and as soon as the cans get up close to the top, the trash starts whisking off the top and down the beach. So if we could look at maybe putting in an extra collection of those cans during the week, that might help. And then the other issue is, I've been a selectman for many years, and a number of the selectmen have always indicated how often they're contacted with issues, and I've always indicated how rarely I've been contacted with issues. I don't know why, but that just seems the way it's happened. But in this case, the issue that Mr. McCaskill has raised has been one of those issues that I have surprisingly been contacted by a number of people over, that it's a concern. So I think we should take that up on Tuesday and have a good discussion.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, this is Joe. I just want to advise the board, if I could, based on some of the comments this evening. Work was already undertaken prior to the discussions about the DPW. The health director and I had a meeting with the DPW director. The governor's order number 21, which was released yesterday, emphasized that recycling centers are essential. So I will have a full announcement Friday evening at your meeting and a rollout of a guidance document. that will be speaking to the resumption of recycling services. Given that the governor has affirmed that that is an essential service. I don't want to get into specifics now until the plan's been finalized, but that was underway before today's discussion, and more to come on that.
Thank you, Joe. I think that's the selectmen. I have nothing to add except to join in with thanking staff and Scott. Your computer expertise has certainly helped us out. It didn't help my internet connection out, but otherwise I'm okay.
I'll work on that for next one.
You need to get this PSL, Larry.
I do, yes. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
Steve?
Second.
Dave seconded. I'll just take a roll call, so we're officially done. Steve?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Ed?
All right.
Thank you and have a good evening.
Thanks.